In the last tutorial, we looked at decisions around maintaining and using resources. In this tutorial, we'll put those decisions into their larger context by discussing the issues of stewardship and sustainability. In our discussions of biblical teachings about the economy, the concept of stewardship came up several times. Stewardship comes from the creation story, where God creates humankind in His own image and gives them dominion over the rest of creation. God gives us the fruits of creation to be our food. God also commands us to work the land, that is, to manage the land so that it becomes even more fruitful, and to take care of it. God makes it clear that even though He's given us creation to meet our needs, we are to do so in accordance with His commands. Most Christian economists take stewardship as the central principle for understanding what it means to act faithfully in economic life. So what does stewardship mean for us today, in a very different context than the Garden of Eden? Two Christian economists define stewardship this way. Stewardship includes conservation, so caring for the natural creation so that it can continue to provide for us and for future generations. This does not mean leaving creation unchanged or never using any natural resources. It does mean ensuring that natural systems and resources remain intact enough so that we don't diminish the creation's ability to sustain human and non-human life into the future. Stewardship also includes avoiding waste. So when we use creation's resources to meet our needs, we need to do so respectfully and only take as much as we need to do what we need to do. Again, this helps ensure that creation can continue to provide for our and others' needs into the future. And stewardship includes prioritizing the most urgent needs of all humankind. So this means that when we use the fruits of creation, we first have to ensure that everyone's basic needs for food, shelter, and so on are met. And only once we make sure that happens, may we also use creation to satisfy our non-essential wants. We talked a bit about efficiency in an earlier tutorial, and we'll return to that concept later. We'll talk about urgency in the next tutorial. Today we'll spend some time on the concept of conservation, or as we more commonly call it today, sustainability. Sustainability has to do with the size or scale of the economy relative to the natural systems that support it. So as we said earlier, all economic activity happens within the ecological context of the Earth's natural life support systems. Everything we produce is ultimately dependent on natural resources. Natural capital, like trees, soil, natural gas, water, and so on, provide the raw materials for all of the manufactured capital and all of the goods that we produce. Natural resources also provide us with the food that gives us physical energy so that we can produce human and social capital as well as all the services we produce. So there's a steady stream of natural resources entering the economy and being transformed into other types of capital, goods, and services. All economic activity also produces wastes. So this includes emissions of air and water pollution that are a byproduct of most production processes, as well as solid waste like garbage that goes into landfills. So again, there's a steady stream of wastes exiting the economy and going into the natural environment. Now the natural environment, or the biosphere, is essentially a closed system. Some natural resources can regenerate themselves over time within that system, such as forests. They do this by using solar energy that enters the atmosphere from the sun, but the limited quantity of this new solar energy limits the rate of regeneration that can happen. As well, nothing else new can enter the system. So once the stock of non-renewable fossil fuels, minerals, and metals is used up, there is no more, at least not on a time scale that's meaningful to humans. The environment also has the ability to absorb some wastes and dilute or process them into harmless forms. So for example, forests can absorb some of the carbon dioxide that we produce in the economy. But this waste absorption capacity is also limited. Furthermore, just as nothing new can enter the biosphere except for solar energy, nothing can exit it except for some waste heat. So all of the chemicals and solid waste that exit the economy remain within the biosphere. If we emit too much waste, it starts to harm natural systems. So economists define sustainability with respect to how much of the existing limited natural resources and how much of the Earth's limited capacity to absorb waste we are currently using. If we're using resources at a slow enough rate that they can regenerate themselves, and if we are emitting waste at a rate that the environment can absorb, the economy is sustainable. But if the economy is so large, we're producing so much stuff that we're using resources faster than they can be regenerated, or we're producing wastes faster than the absorption capacity of the earth can handle, then our economy is not sustainable. We're depleting the carrying capacity of the earth, or its ability to continue to sustain economic activity. The formal definition of sustainable scale is that the physical volume of resources into and wastes out of the economy are at a level that does not erode the carrying capacity of the environment, the biosphere, over time. That is, the ability of the biosphere to continue regenerating resources and absorbing wastes should not be reduced as time goes on. A tool that we can use to measure sustainability is called the ecological footprint. Ecological footprint is expressed in global hectares. A global hectare of land is an area of land, about 2.5 acres, that can produce an average amount of natural resources. A society's ecological footprint is the total number of global hectares it takes to produce all of the food, timber, fiber, and other renewable resources that a society consumes, as well as to support the society's built-up areas like cities and infrastructure, and to absorb the society's wastes. To determine if a society is sustainable, we then compare its ecological footprint to its biocapacity. The biocapacity is the number of global hectares available to use. If a society's ecological footprint is greater than its biocapacity, the economy is functioning at an unsustainable scale. If biocapacity is greater than ecological footprint, then the economy is sustainable. Ecological footprint and biocapacity can be measured on a local, national, or global level, and often to make comparisons easier, we divide the society's total ecological footprint by its population to find ecological footprint and biocapacity per person. So we'll look at some examples and actual data on that later in the tutorial. If we find that an economy is operating at an unsustainable scale, there are a number of things that we can do to address this. And a helpful tool for this is the I equals PATE equation. This equation is a mathematical identity that tells us that an economy's impact on the environment is a function of 4 main factors. The first factor is population. The more people an economy has, the larger its need for resources and the larger its production of wastes. A given population can have more or less of an impact depending on its level of affluence, or how much each person within that society consumes. A third factor is the technology that a society uses. So for example, using energy efficient technology will reduce a society's environmental impact. And ethics can also play a role. So for example, we might decide to consume less than we're actually able to because we believe that that's the right thing to do. Our decisions with respect to this last point, our ethics, will likely depend on our perspective about the proper relationship between humans and the rest of nature. One possibility is that we take an anthropocentric perspective. This means we believe that humans are the most important part of creation and that the purpose of nature is to meet human needs. In this case, we still might want to live within natural limits so that future humans aren't harmed, but other than that, we're not much concerned about non-human creation. An alternative is that we can take an ecocentric perspective, where we believe that nature has an intrinsic value and that humans are just one part of nature. In this case, the rest of creation is just as important as humans are, and we should not take more from creation than we absolutely need, so that the rest of non-human creation can also continue to thrive. A third possibility for Christians and other people of faith is to take a theocentric perspective, where we believe that both non-human nature and humans have value in God's eyes, and that humans have a special calling from God to care for the rest of creation. In other words, we are to act as stewards.